My name is Glasgow, my pronouns are they, them. I am a 25-year-old actor and lecturer from Glasgow, and today I'm going to be answering questions on what it means to be non-binary. How do you explain to people what non-binary means? It tends to be an umbrella term which encompasses kind of any person or identity that doesn't fit into the conventional identities and characteristics that we are taught. This beautiful in-between space of being a man and a woman. It doesn't adhere to the same kind of strict social constructs. This kind of in-between space that can either allow people to feel like they are one or the other in certain times, or they can feel like they are both simultaneously, or they can feel like they're neither. I see non-binary as a term that kind of allows flexibility in between two gender norms that we're kind of brought up with. For me, non-binary means freedom, a lot of freedom in expression and in identity. The ability to kind of create your own self. When did you first start questioning your gender identity? As I was growing up, for the longest time, I didn't really feel like the other girls that I was around, and I couldn't really explain it. At that time, you know, we're just children, we're just little kids, and society then starts to put pressure on us to kind of question what it means, or to be placed into this bracket of what it means to be either a male or a female. I came out as gay when I was 14, maybe. I had a very different experience to the other gay people that I knew in my life. I didn't feel the same way that they did as, you know, lesbian women. And I didn't really understand the notion behind that either. So for the longest time, 5-6 years, I existed as a lesbian woman. And when I would talk to the people that I was dating or other people in the queer community, I didn't really understand why they didn't have the same feelings and expressions towards their body and towards their mind that I did. I assumed that it was something to do with just being gay. Then lockdown hit. I spent a lot of time with myself, reflecting on myself. It just so happened to be about the same time that Drag Race Season 2 UK came out. And Bimini Bon Boulash was spread across my screen every week. And for the first time, they spoke about this kind of gender dysphoria and this uncertainty and what it means to be one thing or the other. And for the first time, I felt like I could kind of, you know, relate. It started to give kind of language and give voice to the internalized feelings that I was having, not feeling comfortable with certain aspects of my body or my brain processing things differently. That kind of freedom to flexibly apply gender and create this weird in-between notion really felt like I was finally able to express what I was feeling inside on the outside. At what age did you come out as non-binary, and do you think that decision can be made at any age? I started to realise that I was non-binary, as I say, in 2020. I didn't actually tell anyone or speak to anyone about it for at least a year. It's a very similar thing that happens to a lot of people before they come out. People need to spend time understanding themselves before they're comfortable kind of coming out. So that was the same journey that I took in terms of coming out as non-binary. I made the decision to go by Glasgow and to use they, them pronouns, maybe just over a year into my journey. And voicing that to people was a process that took even more time in itself. I was probably about 24 before it became a real part of my life that I didn't hide away from or that I didn't shy away from to make life easier for myself. I don't believe that there is any right age or right way to come out as non-binary or as transgender or however you want to describe yourself. I think for me, gender identity and sexuality is a lifelong journey. It is something that evolves and changes consistently throughout your life. Like, we're not made as human beings to be stagnant in who we are. We're made to grow and evolve and change and adapt. And that's how we end up fulfilling the greatest possible life that we can have. Was your coming out a result of gender dysphoria? If so, what was that like? I have been fortunate enough that within my body, I don't have incredibly severe body dysmorphia. which is something that can't be said for a lot of non-binary and trans people. I think there's this idea that to identify as non-binary, we need to create this kind of androgynous individual. But being non-binary doesn't necessarily, it doesn't owe you any kind of form of androgyny. Non-binary people can look however they want to look, whether that's expressly feminine, expressly masculine. In terms of my own personal experience, my gender dysphoria, I think, was more focused in my mind and in my head than within my physicality. I struggled a lot with the idea of what society put on me as being perceived as a woman. I really struggled grappling with the idea of womanhood. I'd be lying if I said that, I was 100% happy with my body. I'm not. I think that being a part of being non-binary or being kind of gender non-conforming does mean that I feel differently on different days. My gender is not consistent. It's not something that I feel the same way about every time I wake up in the morning. But now I find a lot of beauty in the idea that you can wake up and, make your body represent your mind and how comfortable you are in certain aspects of your soul or your identity in that particular day. How would you explain to a cisgender person what it's like to be non-binary? I think first and foremostly, I feel like I'm often surprised by how few people actually know what cisgender means. Just to summarize, I think it's really important to note that being cisgender is essentially when your mind and your body feel like they are related to how your body was born. So most likely, if you were born with a penis, you identify as being a man. If you're born with a vulva, then you identify as being a woman. So the vast majority of people in the world identify as cisgender. So I think in these instances, when I come across people who are not so associated with queer identity, the way that I like to describe what it means to be non-binary, it means that I'm not a man and I'm not a woman. And it's nothing to do with my body. It's nothing to do with the way I like to dress, but it's to do with what's in my head. I also like to say that, people wake up and 9 times out of 10 or whatever, they don't think about the role that they project within society. They don't think about what it means to just put on their clothes in the morning and walk down the street. People are going to see them as a man or a woman, and that's not something that they've never even questioned. Being non-binary to me means waking up every day and questioning that. How did your family react to coming out as non-binary? My family are very loving. They're very affectionate people, and I'm very lucky to, have grown up with them in my life. Coming out as non-binary hasn't been an easy thing for them to process. Coming out as gay was, a challenge in itself. I actually came out as gay to my mum via psychic. So essentially one day she was having her friends round. They were going to talk to a psychic and I thought, I don't want to be anywhere near here. This is not my vibe. And then I came back home and who should open the door at 10 o'clock at night but the psychic, saying he needs to speak to me. Next thing I know, I'm essentially in this cupboard of a room in my house crying because this strange man is telling me that I'm gay and that I need to tell my mum. I ended up telling my mum and we both stood in this little cupboard of a room sobbing with each other. She told me that she loved me, that she would do anything for me and that she accepted who I was as a person. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. So that experience was easy. I think then when I came to talk about being non-binary, it was something that they didn't understand as well. People have got their heads around what it means to be gay, to be a lesbian, to be queer. And while people can find that challenging, they know what it means. My parents had no idea what it meant when I spoke about being non-binary. It wasn't a term that they'd ever heard of. It wasn't something that they could instantly relate to. My mum even said to me, it would be a lot easier for us if you were just straight out transgender, if you wanted to be a boy, I could get my head around that. But I can't get my head around you not wanting to be either of these things. The process of coming out to my family has been really exhausting. I've been told by my parents several times that I will always be their daughter. I get dead named by them every time I go home. It's difficult because they are very loving people. They make these mistakes not intentionally. And so I'm kind of in that in-between process with them right now, whereby I've said, this is who I am. You can choose to accept it or not, but I'm not going to tailor my life or make my life more difficult to benefit you. How do you feel about the representation of non-binary people in media? That's a difficult question to answer because I don't think that there genuinely is much representation of non-binary people in the media. There are a few names that we've heard of. I mean, Sam Smith, Demi Lovato, when both of them came out, I think that really thrust this concept of non-conforming gender into the forefront of people's minds. People know that Sam Smith and Demi Lovato, for example, are non-binary. That doesn't mean that they know what that means. It's a concept that people have begun to hear about. But I think unless you're actively invested in queer media or you're a part of the community, finding that representation is pretty hard to come by. There are a few programs, television shows, films that have tried to bring it to light recently. Drag Race is one, which is really great to see because it is something that doesn't just speak to the queer community. It's this trope, this classic trope within kind of any kind of queer media representation. Queerness is always kind of portrayed negatively. There's always within the media this idea of queer dread, of things going wrong for transgender people. We highlight the transphobia, the homophobia, everything like that. And I think within the media, it's really, really hard to come by queer joy. It's hard to come by stories about non-binary people who are thriving, who are happy, who are, doing these really cool and positive things. The media loves to focus on everything that goes wrong, and kind of it perpetuates this idea that if you are non-binary, that the chances of you being happy are slim, which is so unfair. It's so unjust. What are your thoughts on gender-neutral public toilets? I think the toilet debate is particularly problematic in terms of queer representation and transphobic vocabulary. I think that we force trans people within the media to speak about toilets as a way of avoiding, the really much bigger concerns that are out there about, the conversion therapy ban, which doesn't include transgender people. We take these really, really serious societal issues and make transgender and non-binary people speak about using a toilet. I think everyone should be able to use a toilet comfortably. I don't think that that's the biggest concern that is haunting non-binary people in this day and age. How do you like to express your gender identity? I have a lot of fun expressing my gender identity. It's something that I find really kind of euphoric. In my day-to-day life, I don't dress particularly gendered one way or the other in general. I like to wear big suits. I tend to wear like binders or sports bras that kind of, flatten my chest, but that's not an everyday thing. On nights out is where I really have fun with it. I like to dress in drag a lot of the time. And I think there's always this perception that, to be a drag queen or a drag king, you need to completely subvert these gender norms and go from male to female or female to male. And for me, my drag experience is kind of really fun in creating this kind of in-between character. I like to use my drag to create almost like alien, otherworldly kind of creatures that don't adhere to this strict idea of gender binary. It's a lot of fun to be able to kind of kick to the curb this idea of like what male should be wearing or what a female should be wearing and kind of, merge them, let's smash them together, and it can be so much fun. And I think, drag is something that's really, really allowed me to explore my gender identity. Thank you so much for all of your questions today, and I really do hope that I've helped you to, learn something new about what it means to be non-binary. I think if you're looking to kind of explore this topic in more depth, there are a couple of books I could recommend. The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay is a really, really important book that challenges kind of all kinds of forms of gender expression and does a deep dive into society right now. There's another book called Life Isn't Binary by Meg John Barker, which kind of challenges society's perceptions of gender conformity too.